Hi, my name is Raisha Lovindeer, and I'll be presenting on the Salish Sea Atlantis Model on behalf of the team at the University of British Columbia in collaboration with CSIRO and the University of Victoria. Okay, so where is the Salish Sea? The Salish Sea is a bioregion that encompasses the inland and marine waters and the watershed of British Columbia in Canada and Washington in the United States. It includes the Strait of Georgia to the north, the Strait of Juan de Fuca that connects the Pacific Ocean, and the Puget Sound to the south. The Salish Sea has a long history of human activities, and much of British Columbia's population is clustered around the Strait of Georgia, especially in the metropolitan area of Vancouver. The strait is a popular marine recreational area and is significant for several year-round deep sea shipping ports and to the Pacific salmon fishery. The Salish Sea Atlantis model covers close to the 17,000 kilometers squared inland sea region, with the geography represented by 130 Atlantis boxes, including 2 boundary boxes and 40 land boxes. The boxes were defined to be able to overlap with the Puget Sound Atlantis, and you can hear more about that Atlantis model by a talk by Hemnaline Mazaria Luna. Within each box, there are up to 7 depth layers, depending on the total depth of the box. Shallower boxes have fewer layers. The depth ranges are highlighted on the slide, and this extends to the deepest areas in the Salish Sea. The model itself stops at 700 meters, but there are parts of the Salish Sea that are deeper than that. With respect to model physics, water currents, temperature, and salinity for Atlantis were sourced from outputs of a 3-dimensional hydrodynamic model called Salish Silicast, which is operated out of my advisor, Susan Allen's lab at the University of British Columbia. Salish Silicast uses the NEMO modeling architecture and was developed for the Marine Environmental Observation Prediction and Response Network project. There are 58 biological groups in the Salish Sea Atlantis, and this includes 9 types of salmon due to the large amount of data and the importance of salmon in this region, as well as 12 other fish. And there are other groups that are listed here, and they range from the primary producers, such as the phytoplankton, all the way to large mammals, such as whales, and then other large organisms like sharks. Like other Atlantis models, species are aggregated based on similar sizes, diets, habitat preferences, migratory patterns, metabolic rates, and life history stages. The model structure was developed based on advice from experts in the region, as well as observational time series and other ecosystem models in the region, like Osmosi, EcoPath with EcoSim, and the Puget Sound Atlantis model. There is quite a complex species interaction between all of the organisms. The majority of the initial diet parameterizations were taken from the Puget Sound model, with additional information coming from various Strait of Georgia models, as well as Salish Sea food web studies. This diagram shows the functional groups and their interaction going from the lowest trophic level at 1 to the highest trophic level at 5. And these interactions are a staple of all the Atlantis models, as you know. So what really sets the Salish Sea Atlantis model apart is that we use the model to do oil spill scenario modeling. So we are currently injecting oil or oil-based contaminants directly into the model with the aim of determining the full ecosystem impact of those contaminants. And we want to know the impact across all the trophic levels. So this is the main goal of the project. We're not just focusing on a particular organism or functional group. We want to look at the impact across all of it. Currently, oil is distributed in the model using the Ocean Parcels Toolkit, which is a Lagrangian tracking model that allows us to inject particles and determine exactly where those particles would go when released at a particular location and time period. And ocean parcels uses time steps that are shorter than the Atlantis time steps so that we can really see the full extent of the oil plume. The physical forcing that's used in ocean parcels is the same as that is used in Atlantis. And once we know where the particles would be distributed, then we can take that distribution and create the Atlantis forcing files. Sorry, there was a video on this so that you could actually see how ocean parcels distributed. And then this video is actually showing you the distribution based on Atlantis boxes and how far the oil would spread. Okay, so as I said, we would take this distribution and form Atlantis forcing files, and we convert those ocean parcels particle trajectories into the forcing files by using 4 representative components of oil, and they're listed on the slide. These components have been selected based on their chemical composition, from a representative 2-ringed compound all the way to a 5-ringed compound. And the ratio of these chemicals change in the different oil types. So we use the specific ratio of the oil type that we want to model and put that ratio into the forcing file to represent that oil type. So for example, if we wanted to model diluted bitumen, then we would put the specific ratio of these compounds that are in diluted bitumen in the Atlantis forcing file to be able to represent that oil type. And we can do this across a range of oil types to create the forcing file for Atlantis. Equally important is parameterizing the movement of oil through the ecosystem. This is captured as uptake from the environment as well as through predation. The uptake is dependent on body size, life history, consumption rates, prey choice, and other physical and chemical factors, such as solubility, for example. Contaminants are lost through processes such as metabolism, mortality, and excretion, among others. And of course, data is needed for these parameters. A rich amount of data would be needed. Data on contaminant impacts were collected from a number of lab and field studies, with a focus on the specific representative chemicals that I listed in the previous slide. And now I'm going to highlight some of the challenges that we've been having with the Atlantis model, and especially because we are modeling contaminants in any Atlantis model for the very first time. So the main challenge right now is clearing bugs. As is typical with any new implementation, we hit upon a number of snags in the code. The timing of the pollution incident is an important part of the oil scenario. Whether it happens in the summer, winter, tidal conditions, and so on, that is represented by the time in which the oil is injected into Atlantis. But we hit a problem where in getting Atlantis to recognize the timestamps of the forcing files, the model just did not do this. And so we did come up with a workaround, and we can discuss other solutions in the roundtable. Our workaround was to create a dummy file and fill in the time gap so that Atlantis would then pull in the contaminants right at the beginning, but there would be no contaminants in the dummy file. And then when we actually wanted the contaminants to be injected, then that would be put in at the correct time. So as I said, this is a workaround at the moment, and so we haven't really gone to the source of the problem, and that would be something that we can discuss in the roundtable. Another problem we're having is an inexplicable imbalance in the fluxes, especially initially in the sediments, but also in the water column, and an over magnification of the contaminant concentrations coming in from the forcing files. I personally think that these two problems are linked, but they're, they have not yet been solved. And so these are the problems that we are actively working on with the Atlantis model right now, trying to understand the root cause. Another major challenge with a project like this is filling in the gaps in the data on uptake, impact, and losses of contamination. As I said, we're focusing on a wide range of species. And so we actually have to have a lot of data that covers the full range of the ecosystem. And we're currently drafting a paper on this, on what data we have in hand, where the data gaps lie, and how we can use our confidence in the input data to help us to tune lesser known parameters to match reality. And we have a similar problem with data for calibration. So again, focusing on the whole ecosystem and being able to represent all of the functional groups in the Salish Sea, we actually need quite a lot of data to be able to fully calibrate the model. And this is also one of the major challenges of running a model like this. And as I said, we do rely on the Puget Sound model, but because we focus less on salmon and more on the entire ecosystem of the full Salish Sea, then there are still new parameterizations that need to take place and new calibration as well. And so this is an ongoing project. And then this brings me to my next challenge, and that is when you're calibrating and you're running a model, what is reality? How well are we actually capturing the biology if we don't really have comparative observational data for that species? And we have a similar problem with oil contamination. The Salish Sea has had fewer historical oil spills. And this is a very good thing overall, but not necessarily for us when we're trying to model this. And the lack of oil spills in the region is exactly why we have an Atlantis model here to predict the impact if such an oil spill were to occur. But it still gives us the challenge of a lack of data for comparison. We can compare with other areas, especially those that may have similar hydrology and temperature conditions, such as Prince William Sound, for example, but the ecosystem will not be identical, and so neither will the impacts. But of course, this is a future problem because we still have the hurdle of bugs to overcome with Atlantis. And so that's basically the summary of the Salish Sea Atlantis model, which we are mainly using to investigate the impacts of contaminants in the Salish Sea. And I acknowledge those who have worked tirelessly to develop the model. Their names are listed on the slide, and especially to get the contaminants section of the model working. If you have anything that you'd want to discuss, we can continue the conversation. My email is listed on the slide, as well as the email for Sarah Minot, who is a knowledge broker on the project from the University of Victoria. Thanks.